Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. In this video, I actually have two things that I want to talk about. The first one is that today, December 10th, is Ada Lovelace's birthday. If you don't know who she is, go ahead and look her up on Wikipedia. There's a great article there. But the short version is that computer science, and especially computer programming, would not be where it is today if it weren't for what she did. Really interesting story, really interesting her background, her lineage, her parents, and some of the people that she worked with throughout her life. So if you haven't, if you don't know anything about her, go check out the Wikipedia article. I, being a computer science degree holder, I was familiar with who she was, but I didn't really get a good backstory until I actually read Walter Isaacson's The Innovators. If you haven't read that book, fantastic book. It is kind of the comprehensive, if not real deep book on pretty much the history of the computer age and how we got to where we are now. Really interesting book tying together music, literature, and technology. I can't say enough good things about it. It's a pretty easy read. It's designed for mass readership. So even if you're not a hardcore software engineer like I am, you can appreciate The Innovators and everything that Walter Isaacson talks about in that book. Definitely worth a read. He's the same guy who wrote the Steve Jobs biography, which I'm about halfway through. Also a good book, but obviously that goes a lot deeper into Steve Jobs' life. The second thing that I want to talk about today is, well, we've been talking about parsers all week. So let's talk more about parsers. And specifically, I want to talk about performance and optimization and some of those things. And to be honest, my parser science is a little bit rusty, so I'm not going to go too deep into exactly how to implement parsers with certain characteristics or anything like that. I just want to talk generally about performance. Generally, if you use a library that is designed for parsing, performance is going to be good. Depending on how the parser does things, it might be slightly better for some languages and slightly worse for others. Again, that's some of the nuances of how different parsers are implemented. Some of the things that you probably won't really care about if you're just using a library, but if you started writing your own parsers from scratch, some of the things that you might want to think about are how much history, how many characters of lookback do you store? Because depending on the language, you might need to remember what the previous character was or what a character several characters ago was. In general, the more characters that you need to store, the more characters of context that you need to keep around, the slower the parser is going to be, the more complex the parser is going to be. And depending on the language, it might be easier to implement a parser with some of that context versus, trying to avoid that context and get some additional performance gains. So that's something to think about if you're implementing a parser from scratch. The other big thing is kind of how you build up your abstract syntax tree. And what I mean by that is basically, can I determine, based on just what I have, what I've seen already, and the current character that I'm looking at, can I determine which branch in the parser to take? Can I determine if it's this type of clause or that type of clause? And again, depending on the language, the answer might be maybe. The shallower you have to go down each branch, the better, the more performant the parser is going to be. Now, talking specifically about nom, the way it works is basically I'm having trouble with terminology here because I like to think about the entire thing as a parser, then the individual pieces are, I guess, technically subparsers. In NOM's terminology, the whole thing is a parser. The subparsers are also parsers. They're just smaller parsers. So each individual parser gets run on the input from the current character being looked at. Or actually, NOM is designed to run on bytes as well. So the current byte being looked at, whatever the position in the input is. And if that parser succeeds, that's the output that gets accepted, or that's the way that the input is accepted. If that parser fails, then it does return, I think it returns an I result, which is almost like an optional. It's a type specific to NOM, but it's basically either the parser accepted the input, and here is the parsed value, or the parser rejected the input, and here is the error that it encountered. You know, something along the lines of missing semicolon or expected a parenthesis, or something like that. But basically, NOM runs the parser, and if it succeeds, cool, it gets accepted. As soon as it fails, it stops that branch and tries another branch, which means that there is still some value in thinking about parser optimization, parser performance when using a library such as NOM. You ideally want to design your parsers so that they can fail fast, so that they don't have to go down the incorrect branch as much as possible. As much as you can choose the right branch kind of up front, that's what you want to do, because every time you take a wrong branch, that's adding another, it's not a full n, it's not necessarily n squared, but it's definitely more time consuming. It's going to take longer, and the larger your inputs, the more that time is going to add up. So something to keep in mind when you're writing parsers, especially when you're doing them manually, but even if you're using a library like NOM. So short little video. Hopefully you found it helpful and useful, insightful. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell, and if you have any thoughts at all, please leave a comment down below. I love reading the comments, and I love responding to them, and I hope to see you posting there shortly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.